You people never learn, do you? The sergeant's voice dripped with disdain, his grip tightening with unnecessary force as he yanked Maya's arms behind her back. The cold bite of metal closed around her wrists, the clicks of the handcuffs echoing in the cavernous courtroom. Yet no one reacted. No one moved. It was as if the scene unfolding before them were routine. Another black woman brought down, another case destined to fade from the evening news. She felt their eyes on her, dozens of them, some filled with amusement, others with cold indifference. None with concern for her. A suffocating silence spread through the room, a weight of judgment pressing against her skin. The courtroom walls, adorned with symbols of so-called justice, felt like they were closing in, shrinking, suffocating, trapping her in this moment of humiliation. The only sounds breaking the stillness were the whispers, murmurs exchanged between spectators, low enough to seem discreet, loud enough to be intentional. She really thought she could get away with it. Typical. Always playing the victim. She should have known better. Judge Thompson sat perched behind his towering desk, a symbol of authority, yet his expression was one of bored resignation. His gavel rested lazily in his fingers, tapping against the wooden surface in a slow, rhythmic pattern, as if he were merely waiting for the theatrics to end so he could deliver the inevitable conclusion. He barely bothered to lift his eyes to meet hers. Maya had seen this before, felt this before. The sensation of being reduced to nothing in the eyes of people who saw her as less than. The scripted performance of injustice playing out in real time. The system doing exactly what it was built to do. Yet, she remained standing, not because she wasn't hurt, not because she wasn't furious, but because she refused to give them what they wanted. Fear, submission, defeat. The district attorney, Mr. Harding, stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the floor as he approached the jury. Middle-aged, dressed in a tailored navy suit that screamed prestige and arrogance. He carried a stack of papers in one hand, the other gesturing dramatically as he spoke, his voice coated in false certainty. This woman, he began, pausing deliberately for effect, was caught in possession of stolen property. He lifted a sheet of paper, waving it slightly before placing it on the evidence table. She was seen on security footage. We have multiple witnesses, signed statements. And yet, he turned slightly, his gaze landing on her, eyes filled with disdain. She insists she's innocent. That this is some kind of mistake. A misunderstanding. His lips curled into a smirk. Tell me, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how many times have we heard that before? Laughter rippled through the room, quiet but sharp enough to cut. The sergeant behind her let out a chuckle, shaking his head. They always say that. Maya felt her stomach tighten, not in fear, not in panic, but in rage. They were mocking her, in front of her, confident in the knowledge that nothing would happen to them. That no one would stand up and call this what it was. That no one would care. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself, her hands curling into fists against the cold cuffs. Judge Thompson let out a sigh, finally straightening his posture, as if he had been inconvenienced by the formalities of the trial enough. Enough theatrics, he muttered, shifting his gaze toward her. His expression was unreadable, but his decision had been made long before she ever walked through those courtroom doors. We have seen the evidence. The prosecution has made a compelling case. And quite frankly, I see no reason to prolong this any further. Her chest tightened, not in fear, not in surprise, but in frustration. Because she had seen this before. The mechanical, soulless way justice was denied. The orchestrated performance of authority. The illusion of fairness. She had been tried before the trial even started. She scanned the room. The jury, 12 faces carefully selected to ensure this case had only one outcome. The spectators, some eager, some indifferent, none concerned. The reporters scribbling furiously, recording the fall of another black woman. Another headline that would justify the system's cruelty, and then there were the officers, lined up at the back, arms folded, watching with quiet satisfaction, watching her lose. The judge tapped his gavel lightly against the desk, a soft, almost mocking gesture. And for these reasons, he continued, his voice devoid of any real emotion, I find the defendant. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. Not to him. Not to any of them. Because they thought this was the moment she would break. They thought this was the moment she would lower her head, let the shame settle into her bones, and accept the truth they had crafted for her. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. They had humiliated her, disrespected her, dehumanized her in front of an entire courtroom. But what would they do? What could they do? When they realized that the woman they had just sentenced wasn't just another black woman caught in the system, what would they do when they learned that the woman they had just falsely accused, mocked, and dismissed was one of the highest-ranking intelligence officers in the country? That the very person they had so carelessly tossed into the flames of their injustice was someone who knew every single one of their secrets? The courtroom thought they had won. But the game had just begun. And when the truth came out, the world would watch them crumble. Would justice finally be served? Or would the system try to bury the truth before it could destroy everything? Transition to call to action/plot twist content. Option 2. More direct and emphasizing outward strength. You people never learn, do you? Officer Kincaid's words were pure condescension, his grip a painful reminder as he forced Jade's hands behind her. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the sterile courtroom, a sound swallowed by apathy. To the onlookers, it was just another black woman going down, a statistic unlikely to make the evening news. Jade could feel their eyes, the casual amusement, the bored indifference. Concern? Not a flicker. The silence was thick, a heavy blanket of judgment smothering her. The courtroom, a monument to justice, felt like a trap, shrinking, tightening around her. The whispers started, a low hum of prejudiced commentary. Thought she could get away with it. Typical. Playing the victim, as usual. She should have known better. Judge Miller, a picture of disinterest, sat behind his imposing desk. His gavel tapped a slow rhythm against the wood, as if he were merely waiting for the inevitable. He barely glanced at her. Jade knew the look. She'd seen it before. The feeling of being erased, reduced to a stereotype. The injustice, a well-rehearsed play, with her as the unwilling star. The system, doing precisely what it was designed to do. But Jade stood tall, not out of naivete, but defiance. She refused to cower, to validate their prejudiced expectations. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The prosecutor, Mr. Davies, strode towards the jury, his expensive shoes announcing his arrival. Immaculately dressed in a power suit, his confidence oozed arrogance. He brandished a stack of documents, his voice smooth, deceptive. This woman, he said, pausing for dramatic effect, was caught red-handed with stolen property. He held up a piece of paper, barely concealing his contempt. We have the security footage, multiple witnesses, signed confessions. And yet, he turned to Jade, his eyes cold. She claims innocence. A misunderstanding, she says. He smirked. How many times have we heard that song and dance, ladies and gentlemen? The courtroom chuckled, a sound that grated on Jade's nerves. Kincaid behind her snorted, muttering, they always say that. Rage, a cold fire, burned in Jade's gut. They were mocking her, belittling her, confident in their untouchable power. Jade took a slow, steady breath, clenching her fists. Judge Miller sighed, adjusting his glasses as if disturbed by the tedium. Enough, Mr. Davies. Let's wrap this up. He fixed Jade with a vacant stare. We have the evidence, a compelling case. I see no reason to prolong this. Jade's chest tightened. This wasn't about evidence. It was about optics, about maintaining the status quo. She'd seen this play out too many times before. She scanned the room. The hand-picked jury, their faces already set. The spectators, a mix of rubberneckers and the indifferent. The media, vultures circling, waiting for her to fall. And the officers, her captors, enjoying the show. The judge tapped his gavel, the sound sharp, dismissive. For these reasons, I find the defendant. Jade stopped listening. They expected her to crumble, to hang her head in shame and accept their lies. But they had no idea who she was. They had stripped her of her dignity, violated her rights, but they couldn't touch her spirit. What would they do when they realized she wasn't just another black woman lost in the system? What would happen when they discovered she was one of the most respected intelligence officers in the country? The one who knew all their secrets? They thought they had one. The game was only just beginning. The truth was coming, and it would tear them apart.